All right, Bat fam, here we go. James Gunn was making the rounds on the YouTube yesterday, and now Andy Muschietti is talking because It Welcome to Derry is about to premiere. We're getting a lot of little tidbits about Batman Brave and the Bold, and we got to talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome to Digital Charcuterie. My name is James. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you're new to the channel and a fan of the DCU and looking forward to Batman Brave and the Bold, hit that subscribe button. I talk about it and discuss it with you guys all the time in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts of the Brave and the Bold and Andy Muschietti. Do you think he's still going to direct it by the time this thing happens? What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Let's get into it now. We've known for a while now that Brave and the Bold, this Batman movie, has undergone a lot of changes. They've had some struggles with it since it was first announced a decade and a half ago, whenever that was. But we know that it's gone through some changes. Andy Muschietti's still saying he's involved. James Gunn hasn't said anything to negate that fact whatsoever. So by all accounts, that seems to be the case. In fact, Andy Muschietti spoke with Variety and said any month, week, whatever now, we're going to learn more about Batman Brave and the Bold. He said he can't talk about it. He's already screwed up enough. He can't talk any more about it, so he won't. But we're going to get updates on this thing. Emergency Awesome spoke to James Gunn and asked him kind of about the situation of Brave and the Bold, and he just said it's gone through a lot of changes, and it's not exactly what it was when he first announced it. The story has gone through changes. It's a different story. We've heard in the past also that the Robin situation has changed. When has Batman become a father? When did that all come down? That stuff has kind of changed, and he mostly said, most of what he says is we'll have to wait and see. That's James Gunn's MO. We'll have to wait and see. That's what he's kind of said about Checkmate, about Peacemakers. You've got to just chill out and relax, and you're going to find out eventually. Relax. But we're not going to relax. We're going to talk about it because I have some ideas. Because I'm thinking, what is going on with this movie that's so hard to crack? Now, look, I'm not making the movie, and it's also part of a bigger DCU, and you're dealing with the Matt Reeves Batman as well. So you can't do something that mimics that one, although I can't see something like that being mimicked in the DCU. Unless, of course, you bring Robert Pattinson into the DCU, then, but we're not going to go there. So what is going on with Batman, the Brave and the Bold, if it's still Brave and the Bold? We know that back in 2023, that was a decade and a half ago, when James Gunn and Peter Safran laid out their gods and monsters slate, the Brave and the Bold was positioned as the core Batman story for the new DCU. Gunn himself described it as a father and son tale. His favorite Robin, Damian Wayne, raised by the League of Assassins and suddenly dropped into Bruce's life. He called it a very strange father and son story, directly inspired by Grant Morrison's legendary run. That was the pitch. That was the hook. Everyone thought, okay, cool. This is where the DCU introduces an older Batman, one who already has history, already has a Bat family, and we finally get live-action Damian. But James Gunn said it's going to be a mid-30s Batman. He's not going to cast an older Batman. And over the last few months, James Gunn's been real careful about what he talks about with this movie. In a recent interview, he said, quote, some things have changed, plenty of things are in flux on what his situation is with his parentage and all of that stuff. That's a big deal. Parentage situation, that's Gunn basically telling us the whole Batman discovers his assassin son storyline might be in flux. Then, when asked point blank if Damian is still Robin in the film, Gunn says, you'll have to wait and see exactly what's happening. Dude, that's a total pivot from the way they were describing it a few years ago. And now Andy Muschietti, as I said earlier, is still attached. He drops the bombshell this week saying, we'll learn more about the film in a few months, so something's clearly brewing at DC Studios. They're either working the script or trying to lock down a creative direction that lines up with this new DCU continuity. My belief is they need Batman. I think the DCU needs Batman. James Gunn said, we're not going to see D-list superheroes on the big screen. We got to see the A-list heroes. And the A-list are Superman, which we got, and we're getting a sequel to, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Those are your big three. Those are the Trinity at DC, and we haven't got anything from Batman and nothing from Wonder Woman aside from a little glimpse in Creature Commandos, and those are the two. We know that Wonder Woman's been fast-tracked, and we know that he's working diligently to get this Batman script going. I think he desperately wants Wonder Woman and Batman in the theater immediately following, and when I say immediate, like within it, like a year or so, with after Man of Tomorrow. I think Man of Tomorrow is priority, and then you get Batman or Wonder Woman the following year. Maybe both of them the following year, but I think definitely one of them for sure in 2028. You go 2027 Man of Tomorrow and Batman or Wonder Woman in 2028. You got to get them out of the gate. So let's start connecting these dots because this is where the timeline problem comes in. Originally, Gunn said Bruce didn't even know Damian existed for the first 8 to 10 years of his life, which means Bruce would have had to have been operating as Batman for a long time, maybe 15 years, before Damian even shows up. But in the DCU, we know Superman is younger. He's only been around for 3 years as Superman. You can't have a 45-year-old Batman running around while Clark's just starting out. And do you want to? Do you want to have a mid-40-year-old Batman running around? It's cool right now, but in 10 years, you've got a 54, 55-year-old Batman running around. And all of a sudden, you say, is this the Batman we need? Can we rely on Damian Wayne? Can we rely on Robin? Should Batman be a little bit younger? James Gunn, like I said a little while ago, he alluded to the fact that Batman's going to be probably in his mid-30s to start out, which I think is a smart decision. But when you do that, all of a sudden, the timelines start to get all messed up. My guess is that's what's changing. They're tweaking the origin so that Bruce isn't that old when Damian enters the picture. Or maybe the Damian part is being saved for later. But here's the other thing. James Gunn loves stories about found family. Look at Guardians of the Galaxy, Peacemaker, and the Suicide Squad. Every single one of those is about broken people learning to become a family. Not by blood, but by choice. So you tell me, do you think James Gunn, the guy who wrote Yondu yelling, "He may be your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy," is going to make his Batman movie entirely about biological parentage? I don't know about that. He could potentially turn the story about adoption, mentorship, and what it means to be a father figure to kids who aren't biologically yours. That is a James Gunn theme. They could be recentering the story around the idea of fatherhood, not necessarily the literal son of Batman. But then, of course, what separates Damian from the other Robins? If Damian isn't biological, he could still be the heir. Even if Gunn changes the blood aspect, Damian could still be spiritually or symbolically Batman's heir, the one trained from birth to replace the Dark Knight. Imagine he's Talia's son, raised by the League of Assassins to believe he's the heir of Batman, the chosen successor, engineered to embody both justice and brutality. Then Bruce finds out this kid exists, that he's been taught to kill in Batman's name, and takes him in to save him from that path. This would keep the Grant Morrison DNA intact, Damian as the assassin who has to unlearn murder. It also lets Gunn lean into his favorite themes: identity, family by choice, the power of nurture over nature. In that version, it's not about Bruce correcting his biological mistake, it's about correcting a moral one. So he's different from the other Robins because Dick was trained as a partner, Jason was saved from the streets, Tim was a prodigy who found Bruce. Damian, though, he's the enemy child, raised by the ultimate weapon against Bruce, and then redeemed by Batman himself. 2, he could be the replacement Robin. Another angle, Damian might not start as Robin at all. He might replace a Robin who's gone. Let's say in the DCU timeline, there were previous Robins, Dick, maybe Jason, and Bruce is emotionally closed off because of what happened to them. Then along comes Damian, this intense broken kid from the League of Assassins who forces Bruce to reopen that wound and become a mentor again. So even if he's adopted, the contrast is sharper. The others chose to follow Batman. Damian was built to fight him. That's what separates him. His story starts in opposition. He's the Robin who doesn't want to be Robin. Son of the Bat as a title, not a fact. In the comics, Ra's al Ghul literally calls Damian the son of the Bat. If Gunn wants to avoid the genetic baggage but keep the legacy, he could use that as a title, not a fact. It fits Gunn's adoptive family obsession. And this is the big point. James Gunn lives for stories about people who make families, not inherit them. Like I said, Star-Lord and Yondu, Rocket and the Guardians, Peacemaker and the 11th Street Kids. If Gunn writes Damian as adopted, he's making the storyline thematically perfect for his worldview. Family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when you need them. So the emotional hook becomes Bruce, a man terrified of losing people, adopts a weaponized child who's never known compassion, and through that act, both of them heal. But ultimately, I don't think that's something you want to do, and I don't think that's something that James Gunn would do. As much as it fits his narrative and his aesthetic and what he loves to portray in his films, I feel like if you're going to use Damian Wayne, you're not going to change the one thing that really makes Damian Wayne stand out, and that is being a Wayne. Damian Wayne was, of course, the original Hook, but the way Gunn talks about his movie now makes me think they might actually be using Dick Grayson as the main Robin in his story. Or at the very least, they'll be bringing in multiple Robins, with Damian being teased for later. Why? Because introducing Dick opens the door to the entire Bat family narrative. And Gunn keeps teasing Dick, Jason, Tim, Barbara. They're all part of that dynamic. If you start with Damian right out of the gate, you skip a ton of emotional potential. But if you build to Damian, if you show Bruce mentoring other kids first, the eventual my real son shows up moment hits way harder. I'm going to put my money still on Damian Wayne being Robin, but I think, look, there is a really great chance that maybe you start off with Dick Grayson as your Robin in the first Batman movie. Maybe that's where you go. You show Dick Grayson, maybe he's Robin, maybe he's Nightwing at this point and there is no Robin, and then we get into a Robin, and maybe it's a Jason Todd or somebody else, and we get in there, and you start to understand the Bat family, we start to grow, we start to see the Batman mentorship progress, and then you bring in a Damian Wayne, or maybe you hear about a Damian Wayne. Maybe there's little things going on that you don't quite know. So I think Damian Wayne ultimately is going to be the biological son of Bruce Wayne. I just think making that change is just too big of a change to do, and that can mess everything up. But I do think there's a possibility that maybe they're removing that aspect from the storyline altogether, and we might get a Dick Grayson Robin or a Jason Todd Robin. I think those are the two contenders for a Robin right there. I think Dick Grayson, you got to get in there and you got to get out. He's got to become Nightwing. I think he's got to become Nightwing sooner than later, which for me was a criticism of the old Batman and Robin movie, which is the greatest movie ever made, because he kind of starts off as Nightwing and he wants to just be Nightwing, and it felt too soon. But in this instance, because it's a shared universe, because it's going to go on for at least a decade, you think maybe it'd be good to get Nightwing going on in there, right? You got him as Robin if you want, and then get him out as Nightwing, or you start him off being like, hey, I'm on my own, and I go off, and then we find a found family, a new mentor, and a new protege happening between Batman and a Jason Todd, something like that. And then you can get that storyline going too, because that's a strong storyline you can use. But Brave and the Bold obviously is the Damian Wayne story, and that's the one that James Gunn really wants. So the question is, how do you line up the lineage of it all, right? The timeline has to make sense. You have Bruce have this child at 20 and he gets him at 34. How old is Damian going to be? There's a lot going on. And the other issue too is if this is going on for 10 years, Damian Wayne, Baby Yoda can stay Baby Yoda forever. Damian Wayne's going to grow up. So you have to take that into account when you're telling the story as well. How young is this child going to be? What is this child going to do? And what is the future of this child? Because you can't just have a Damian Wayne in there for one movie. This character's got to be around for the whole stretch of your saga, unless people make a phone call and vote for his death. But this character's going to be around for a while, and he's going to age. This character's going to age and grow up in front of our eyes, and that could be one of the big stumbling blocks that they've caught up on. But I think it's going to be Damian Wayne. But I like the idea of having a Dick Grayson in there, or maybe a Jason Todd in there first, and then we get into Damian Wayne. That bleeds us into that. That's what I kind of like right now. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Adoptive Damian Wayne? Do you think this is an option right now? Do you think that James Gunn would consider that? And what Robin is your favorite? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Hit the like button and subscribe button. Until next time, may be the master of your own universe.